Welcome everybody to Eye of the Serpent Tarot for another pick a card. So today we're going pretty deep and spiritual and pretty deep into your past. That's part of this. There is a implication in this of past lives, but if you don't believe in past lives, that's fine. Just when I talk about past lives or your past, think about earlier stages in this life and how it might apply. So it doesn't rule you out if you don't believe in past lives, but I suspect for most who come to this channel, you probably do. And so it sort of enriches it to think of it in that way. And it's important to know that because the choice of pile and the tarot decks that are associated with it are kind of loosely connected to that. The idea of this is to find what deep spiritual experiences you've had in the past, or one or two that are very key. Could be learnings, could be experiences, could be gifts that you developed, could be anything, and how they are now being called upon by your soul for your path now. So what I felt and why I did it was that I just recently got a couple of new decks. This deck I've had for a while, and I just sort of felt that why I got these two decks in particular was for past life readings. So I think delving into the past is an energy for these decks. And this particular deck, the Antiquarian Tarot, I use around fortune telling and kind of like ancestral stuff and so forth. So I felt they're all, because of the nature of the decks, and I'll talk about that, they fit with an energy of the past. Now, each of them fit with what might be a place and a very, very broad kind of timing, but you don't have to be tied to that. So if you're just drawn to the imagery or the sense or the idea of it, that's fine. It doesn't mean that it had to be a past life or lives in those times and in that culture. It's just meant to get that kind of sense, to draw in the energy of the past, even if it isn't an exact fit. So I don't, for instance, have one there that is, ancient Egypt, though there's one that kind of like I feel, because of the card that came out, might also encompass that. I don't have, Atlantis or something like that either in there. So it's don't be too constrained by that. Just go with what you feel. So we're going to be looking at a kind of map of the energy and the past that you're working with, and then we're going to look at what special energies have you deeply worked with before, or occult energies, that kind of thing. What role or position or duty or path was associated with it, like how did you use it, and then we're going to see why they're important now and that kind of thing, and then build on that from there. So for pile number one, for each of them I shuffled and asked for the first major arcana card to give us some idea about the nature of the energy. And as I say, beyond that, you might be drawn to a tarot deck when you hear what the tarot deck is. But that's, choose however you normally choose. Go to more than one if you want. All of that's fine. For pile number one, we have the Tibetan Tarot and we have the Empress card. For pile number two, we have the Renaissance Art Tarot. So I was thinking that's kind of all the kind of, Renaissance sort of period, medieval Europe, but it could potentially go way, way back as well. And because the High Priestess card comes up, I associate that quite often spiritually with the mystery schools in ancient Egypt. So as I say, it doesn't have to be specifically Renaissance Europe, but it's that kind of feel to it. And we have the High Priestess card, and for pile three, we have the Antiquarian Tarot, which to me feels like Victorian England, maybe Edwardian England. Doesn't have to be England again, sort of Europe and that level, but kind of more recently. And, the time of spiritualism and, the birth of organisations like the Golden Dawn and that kind of thing. And we've got the Death card there. So you do you as choosing it. That's to give you an idea of just the energies and why I chose the decks that I chose. But you do you as to how many readings you go to and which ones. When you know, the timestamps are in the description box below, and I'll see you there. Welcome pile one to your reading. So you go to the reading with the Empress from the Tibetan Tarot. This could mean that you're drawn to things like Tibet or the sort of traditions and spiritual backgrounds that Tibet typically represents. But as I said, that doesn't have to be the case. It certainly, though, is a sort of sense, I think, of simplicity, non-attachment, and the kind of the breadth and depth of the world and the breadth and depth of the soul is sort of, if I think about the energies that I feel when I look at this tarot, that's what I sort of get. And that kind of fits with, as I say, those sort of traditions, but it fits with many traditions, so that's fine. You came to the Empress. And that's very interesting given some of the rest of it. So let me tell you what this first layout is about. There is the path of the illuminated soul to show something about where your soul was at when you accessed this sort of ability, this sort of knowledge, this sort of experience and so forth. And to give us a little bit more of an idea about what you did and why, we have two other members of a pantheon and it's just to sort of also broaden the fact that this is not necessarily a life in ancient Tibet. I mean, it could be if that's why you were drawn to it, but it doesn't have to be. So it's to give me a sense about what was going on, what was the overall spiritual energy that we're looking at, and why was it happening, so that we just get a sort of an entry point. So the Empress to me suggests sort of like abundance, nurturing, the feminine principle, but also new growth. You know, with the Empress, there is that sense, you know, she is often portrayed, not so much here, but she is often portrayed as a pregnant woman. So there is a sense here of the divine feminine, which is interesting because these are both divine masculine types of other entities. There's a balance of the male and female here. And there's also the balance of an end of a cycle and the birth of a new one here. And I think it was a breakthrough to have this. So one thing that I get very strongly for some of you, and it won't be always this is a very literal thing, but I think for some of you, there was a connection to the divine feminine and the spiritual arts of fertility. And it was because it was part of your story and your soul's mission to create, to have a child or something like that. I suspect you were female, therefore, in this life, and that's also why the Empress has come up. But this is for some of you, and there was a block, and this was how to break through the block, to break one cycle where fertility was not sort of coming through, and to get to a higher order level, higher spiritual level, to break a stagnation or break an issue. If it isn't literal as a pregnancy and a birth, there is something also about that, a new idea, a new culture, a new belief system, something like that. There is the birthing of the new. Because if we look at these two, along with the Empress, we've got this extremely strong divine feminine, abundance, growth, nurturing energy. We have Zarathustra that is connected to Ceres. Ceres in astrology is the hearth and home. So there is this sense, you know, and it does have a kind of, even though this is a masculine energy, there is still a kind of maternal, nurturing, keeping the home fires burning. But Zarathustra comes around when there is an end of a cycle. This interests me because one of the cards here in the soul is stagnation, the bread oven. It says the dial stays stuck, things no longer move, time to turn up the heat. I feel that there is something about the life that this was done, and this will be in various ways, but depending on who comes to it, where something was stuck, the old order needed to close out, but there needed to be something to go towards. And I think your spiritual ability, whether it was some sort of prophetic ability, whether it was literally a manifestation ability, or some combination of both, was to understand that it was time for a new cycle. And that you were there with I am me, the soul story. Typography of the soul writes its own words, the story of you. There was something very fundamental about you in the birthing of whatever this new thing was. But it was also a block you had to get past, which then takes you to ether, which is a sky god, and that is the sense of being able to get above things and see the bigger picture. That also feels a bit prophetic. This is why I sort of feel like the kind of things that probably came in here was you came into the world at a particular time. This may be the case now as well, given that this is important. And it is the end of one cycle in some way, either very, very personal to you or much more transpersonal for the world or for a country or for a community or whatever it is, moving into something new when it isn't clear what that new thing is. So there is a necessity to get above. Now, ether is interesting. It connects you to the etheric realms. So in terms of psychic and spiritual ability, that's also high magic in its own way, and it's also potentially things like understanding the Akashic records, the kind of life and death cycles, that kind of thing as well. But whatever it is, it's to see what is coming and to see it at a distance. I often say, actually, for reading tarot cards, that to me, when you seem to see the future, you're actually seeing the present day at long distance. And this talks about the present day, and then this talks about the bigger picture. So the present day could get stuck because it's time for something new, But getting the higher order thing, you can see the probabilities. Wouldn't be at all surprised if many of the people who pick this pile are actually naturally very good at things like tarot reading, divination, and as I say, prophecy. But this all happened for a very specific reason. It happened so that you would shift a society, shift a group, shift a family, shift whatever it is into the future after it got stuck. So you're meant to kind of almost pull the lever of change in some way, and to have enough of a long range vision, and with a very divine feminine energy of nurturing, of abundance, of growth. This is about something that is meant to be positive. So it's not chaos. It's not, you weren't some chaos magician that threw everything up into the air. You actually came in at the right time because it's part of who you are. You sort of like inserted into the world or into situations at times when this is necessary. I mean, it may not be every life you have, but this is what's relevant now. So it probably is, very relevant to the life you have at the moment, and having that higher order perspective. Okay, so with that setting the scene, let's use the tarot. Let's have a look at what spiritual energies have you deeply worked on before in this sort of space that is relevant. Then we're going to look at what role did you have. I mean, there's a little bit of a hint there, but let's see what that role was. And then let's see how are they important now? Like why, how does that connect to your current life? And as I say, if you don't believe in past lives, I think this might be something of almost a transitional period when think back to when you maybe left home. You took on your own adulthood. You went from being a child into home, and you started to, because if you hadn't done that, you would have stagnated. And at that point, it's like you had a vision of your future, and it's likely to be pretty accurate. So anyway, that's just in case you don't believe in past lives. So let's have a look at, what spiritual energies have you deeply worked with before that are relevant to this. The Ten of Swords, the endings of things. The Fool and the new beginnings. There it is, like in endings and new beginnings. 10 of Cups, very connected to family and community. The 5 of Coins reversed and connecting people. And the Queen of Wands. Okay, yeah. So I do think, whether or not you're female, no, you don't have to be female or identify with being female now, but whether or not that's the case, in this life, I definitely think that you were a woman. Unless, of course, you don't believe in past lives. But I'm largely going to talk in past lives now. So just apply that to this life if you don't believe in past lives. So I think you were a woman. I think you were a woman of some status or very well known in some way. So your viewpoints, your energy and your authenticity were a big part of how you could shift things. You were very community and family oriented. So for you, there's almost a first point around spirituality. It's around how does it affect others? How does it help others? And how does it bring people together rather than separating them? So there's a very, very positive energy, but it is in a time you come in, or this particular ability really shows itself when there has been a battle, when there has been a lot of drama, and it's the drama and then the new life. So I think that there's a sense, and as I say, for some you just might have been a very powerful matriarch in a family when there was a time of change going on that was impacting the family. And, maybe you even had a child at that point because you could see that was how you furnish the future with what the future requires. But it's like a prophetic energy. What it is you sense really well, probably way ahead of the drama happening, that the drama is coming, but how that seeds the new beginning and how that moves forward. And if it was around seeing that and understanding how to get everything into balance and connected to bring a child in, then you may have been able to almost divine within your own body, I am me, what was necessary to shift and change so that the new energy could come in. So I think whatever this is, whether it's bringing a child in for a lineage that in some way takes a family forward, or whether it is, and I think it's probably more this for most people, being a sort of a change agent and a prophet who comes in, that's something that you did. And the time that this really showed up and that you really started to understand your ability, you had enough power and enough presence in whatever your kind of locus of impact was, to be heard, like you were heard. You were almost, it's interesting, like I feel almost like it could have been in a society that was normally women should just, have children and be behind the scenes, but there's something about your energy and your sense of prophecy that almost came across with a masculine way of doing it and speaking it, so it broke through those sort of conventions. So I think you're also good at actually toggling between the divine masculine and divine feminine to bring the messages and to shift where things have got stuck. So what role did you play? Let's see if we can get a little bit more of an idea about what was really going on when you developed this sort of, it's like seeing and influencing the future at the same time. That's what we're talking about here. So the role, 3 of Cups, 2 of Wands, Judgment. Yeah, this is I think you actually, I'm getting very strongly when I see this for some reason that whether this was something that was conscious within your culture or not, you had a very strong connection to angelic realms, very strong. Like you channeled a lot from the angelic realms. The Sun. And Strength reversed. Yeah, I think that you were in a role where you were not able to be ostensibly powerful, but the power of your energy, your clarity, your life path, your accuracy in all of these things was what was necessary. Like the power behind the throne, which is actually the power. That's the kind of energy here in whatever level we're talking about. And part of your power also was that you could be gentle. Like you didn't have to like push forward. You could see the energy, and there was a lot of drama or whatever, but you didn't kind of meet. It feels very martial arts actually, which is interesting with coming to the Tibetan one really. But like there's a sense of like being able to joyfully and rhythmically move with energy, so that you don't have to be as forceful as the change to bring about the new thing. It's more that there is a kind of sense of joy to take a new direction forward, and such clarity. Judgment, it was always spot on. I think probably, again, whether you're looking at this from when you were really young and this is where you started to kind of break out into your life and you can see what your life is, or whether this was, in a past life, I think that you probably had a kind of prophetic ability from when you were very young. I feel like this is a life path that started very young. I know that a child is often shown on the Sun card, but I'm feeling with this, just because of the way it dominates the thing, that this is something that when you were a child, you were known or seen to be special in this way, and you grew even more into it, and it's why you were listened to, because you had this kind of ancient child sort of feeling about you. So I think your role was like an advisor to those that needed to make the change in whatever part of the world this was, and you had this sort of way of kind of being able to help me. Like it's almost got a kind of not Machiavellian feeling to it, but it almost has a sense of like really understanding the dance or the game of whatever you were dealing with as well too, and like how to kind of get the decisions that are necessary to move forward. So it's like a spiritual power of flow, of meeting energy, understanding it, and seeing the future. So why is this important now? How is this playing out now for you? The 3 of Wands, the 8 of Coins reversed. Boy, you've mastered this. The Queen of Swords, the 7 of Cups. Okay. Either right now or what's coming up, and you'll sense it. You'll know if it's right now because you'll be feeling stuck in some way, and you know that a breakthrough is necessary. Otherwise, the way you're going to know is that energy is going to get a bit stuck, and you can sense that that's the calm before the storm, and then after the storm something new needs to come in. That's where you can connect in and do the prophetic thing. But there is a new pathway, either for you very personally, or for whatever it is that you're around. And it's important now because your mastery is critical for this pathway to be born, to happen. And as I say, it doesn't have to be the world stage, though for some of you it could be. But you have mastered it with the 8 of Coins reversed. You no longer have to practice at this. You have brought in a very well-developed skill. And you have the intellect and the kind of like almost academic, or I don't know, even maybe scientific gravitas that people will listen to you. Like you feel almost like someone who has gone through academia and science, and you can link that to magic in some way. And it is interesting, I think, as we move more, or there could be tech stuff as well, AI with swords, but as we move more and more into sort of the Aquarian age and Pluto and Aquarius, I think that we're going to find people who connect magic and science in a way that's never happened before. And I think you may be one of them in some way. So that's going to be important. And that is to both allow for a new vision, like a new ideal to occur, but also to be very clear about what is real and what isn't real. Like it's like if you and 5 other people who practice divination sat in a room, you'd be the one who's most likely to be accurate. Like it's just it. You've mastered it. So that's very, very interesting. Okay. So somehow seeing the future and starting a new pathway for either you very personally or for whatever it is that you've come in to do. This is why, and it's connecting back to this ability you developed very early. So let's have a look at some past lives that also developed this apart from this, to see what else we have in a sense on the menu that you can draw from. And again, if you don't believe in past lives, look at these as aspects of the life that you've been in, extrapolating it out to periods in your life or focuses in your life. So the first past life, type of past life that also allowed you to develop this ability was the charioteer's reins, life spent in pursuit, steering through challenges or as a driver of change and progress. So I think sometimes you might have been more the kind of prophetess, matriarch. Other times you may very well have been the warrior or whatever, but you are a change agent. So this energy was used in that kind of life. Secondly, the potter's wheel, moulding and adapting, creating functional art as a keeper of elemental crafts. So sometimes this may literally, like baking, pottery, sometimes it may have been very much in the home environment, and you may have almost been able to manifest things by creating art that showed what was coming in the future. And the explorer's compass, that makes sense. A life of seeking horizons, pioneering discoveries, or as a trailblazer of new paths and ideas. So it's these two in particular are very like this energy. Though I feel like this particular life we're talking about, you were an advisor to someone very powerful, and you were very powerful as a result of it. But I think you also have used that in exploration, in sort of almost conquest. But sometimes it's just very simple and you do it through a kind of almost material cipher. So very interesting sort of ways that this has operated for you. Let's have a look at the alchemy of that energy. So we're going to look at the alchemy of the originating energy and the alchemy of it for you now. So the alchemy of the originating energy was resin. Okay. Well, that kind of makes sense with the potter's wheel as well. Resin is where things of the past that are precious are maintained, but they're maintained in a way that sort of saves them but is no longer used. So, resin as a material, it's fluid at first, and you can put something like a rose or a piece of jewelry or something like that in, and that actually protects the past, but it holds it still in the past. So some of this was creating, I think, almost an archive of the past or a reverence for the past that allowed that transition to happen without too much loss. So you understand how to move into the future without losing what is valuable in the past. And you develop that particularly in this life. What about this life, this current life that you're in? Fog. Okay, this is about finding clarity. That's why, we sort of had the sense of the Queen of Swords. Like a big part of this in this life, in whatever way it is your kind of intellectual understanding of this and the capacity to sort of like articulate it and get people to understand it and work with it and find their way. I think right now it's probably saying that you're on the outskirts of whatever this change is, and everybody feels like they're in a fog. And yet you can get above it to the ether and you can see what's coming. I sort of think it's funny, at the time that I'm actually recording this, and it may not, I'm not sure exactly when I'm going to publish it because I sort of upload and then sort of semi-schedule, but then I always let Spirit tell me what one to actually publish next. But there is actually a lot of talk about fog in various places and what that could be. So for some of you, you might be connected to that and the science and the understanding of that, and particularly if there's anything truly mysterious about it. Okay, so what spiritual gifts align with this as well that you can use? So we know the sort of prophet, the change agent, and the prophet. What else do we have? Divination. Yeah, that's well, yeah. So I said, you would be superb at divination. You'd be superb at doing this. And you'd be likely to be far more accurate than most people. I think one of the reasons is that you're more comfortable with change, actually. You're comfortable with change and you're comfortable with drama because you see the seeds of something new in it. So you don't like what tends to make us partisan or biased, and a lot of political tarot is like that, for instance, is that there is such a sense of there's only one way and it's supporting that way and demonizing the other, that there is very little flexibility for change. I think that you could rise above that. You can see above all the petty stuff and get to the point of like, where are we going? And intelligence, very, very smart, but also, you could be. There's the other thing. I was sort of saying science. I was saying AI. You could do this remote viewing, intelligence. Like I do feel there was something kind of political or social in the origin story of this. If you saw this as an origin story of a particular spiritual gift or set of gifts you have, I think you are like that. That's why it's sort of getting like a kind of spiritual Machiavelli, like a cross between a Nostradamus and a Machiavelli, if that makes sense. So that sort of that ability, and I think probably astral travel, remote viewing, all of that kind of thing is all connected in to what you can do in this life. So it's very interesting. Okay. So let's get some stars to guide you. Let's just get a couple of planetary pairings that are relevant to you accessing and using this ability now. Mars and Neptune. Yeah, it's the change energy coming out of the ether. It's the change energy coming out of the liminal space. I would actually, if I were you, do quite a bit around like kind of trying astral travel, remote viewing, that kind of thing. I think you'd be a natural at it, and I think it starts to give you a sense of the direction and what needs to be done. There is a call to action in all of this as well. And Neptune and Neptune, yeah. Trusting that you are accurate in that space. And it's sort of like bringing the ideal out of the fog. It's interesting that it fell with the fog rather than just everybody being confused. Like you are an actor in confusion, actually. And you're also an actor in the liminal where the future can be created. So you are meant to kind of come in and shift everything, get it out of being stagnant, get the change that's necessary. Very, very psychic, though. You're very, very spiritually gifted. Okay. Last but not least, I'm doing a thing that I've been doing a little bit lately. And again, I'm not sure whether this might be the first time you've ever seen it, depending upon when I publish this compared to the others where I've done it. But I usually sort of finish with one card from an oracle just to bring it all together. What I want to do is use 5 cards from a tarot deck, so representing the numbers 1 through to 5. And just say for each of those, if you choose a number, that's what I'm going to ask you to do, is choose a number from 1 to 5. And pause if you need to, but otherwise just choose it while I'm doing the explanation. I'm then going to go through with the corresponding tarot card to say how I think it all comes together. And it just gives us a little bit more variety within a collective reading for what this could be about. So if you could please choose between 1 and 5 now and pause if you need to. Okay, so for number 1, we have the 6 of Swords. For number 2, we have the 9 of Cups. For number 3, we have the Queen of Cups. For number 4, we have the Hanged One. And for number 5, we have the Queen of Wands. I just want to say what I find really interesting there is all of those are upright. You are meant to be seen. This is not meant to be a hidden gift. I think it was a little bit hidden from maybe the general populace before, but not for the powers that be. But I think this is meant to be something you're meant to bring out in the world, regardless of whichever the one you chose. If you chose number 1, then you have a clear sense of peace around this. This ability you're very well aware of, and it gives you a sense of peace even when others are thinking that there is calamity around. So I also think that a sense of peace is when you've got the answer. When you move from wondering, questioning, worrying, and you just suddenly kind of have a sense of peace, trust that instinct because it's going to be very accurate for you. If you picked pile number 2, you have a deep wish that you want to bring in. For some, this might be the one where I felt for some of you, this could be about having a child. So it doesn't have to be. It's just an example. But there is a deep wish. So you're not exactly, I mean, you are able to get above all the petty stuff, as I said, but you have skin in the game if you chose number 2, because there is a wish, there is an ideal that you want to bring in. And I think this is saying that you are capable of doing it and you're a pivotal part of doing that. If you chose number 3, this is triple emphasizing your spiritual gifts, because this is a Scorpio card. It suggests that you can get into the depths and you're very, very understanding of human nature, because it's a Scorpio sort of energy. And I think a lot of what you do has to do with shifting the minds and hearts of people by getting to that depth. So it's not so much for the people who chose 3 that this is like you're choosing a new AI world or something like that. It's more understanding human psychology and helping them through change. If you chose number 4, this may not be happening immediately. There may be a bit of a delay and a period of time for you to contemplate it. Otherwise, there might be a calling for you to sometimes slow down the change because you are more comfortable with it than others. Or there could be a bit of a sacrifice you will be called upon to make spiritually to really bring this into being. And if you chose number 5, you are particularly meant to be seen with this. I feel like, if you've got the divination, all that stuff, you should be on YouTube or something like that doing the sort of thing that I'm doing. Like, you absolutely should. This is partly how you will self-actualize, coming into seeing this ability. And there's a huge creative energy here too. Maybe one of the ways that you influence and help change is through something that you do creatively. Okay, so that's your reading, pile 1. I hope that resonated for you and you enjoyed it. If so, please like the video and subscribe. If you care to share in the comments, I'd love to hear. Otherwise, I hope to see you in future readings. Welcome, pile 2, to your reading. So you came to the reading with the Renaissance Art deck and with the High Priestess card. And as I said in the introduction, I mean, this is the sort of one that makes me think of the mystery schools and ancient Egypt and all that sort of stuff. Certainly what we're looking at here is some form of developing an understanding of occult knowledge, of very hidden knowledge. The occult means hidden, but it has many different permutations. And I've got to say, looking at these cards, I think you might have had a sojourn in learning the sort of like either the left-hand path or the shadow path or something like that. Made you very powerful. It's kind of like going into the darkness to carry the light in. So I don't think that your motives were an issue, but I do think that you had to deal with the very powerful energies of that side of things and understanding it. So as I said, when we look at that kind of around Renaissance art, I mean, what it makes me think of when I look at these two deities that are connected or help describe the power that you accessed or the knowledge that you accessed, I sort of feel a lot like, John Dee working for Elizabeth I, or, Giovanni Bruno, like the kind of major occultists. Or even a little bit further along, a Madame Blavatsky or something like that, sort of. But there's something here about occult knowledge, Gnostic knowledge maybe. That's what you're drawing on. You've got a lot of that. Whether you were aware of it or not, you've got a lot of it. And I think you did come from a sense with the powerful illuminated warrior where it says the tower is tall, she rises up, she conquers all. There's this sense that like there was a battle, so you went in to understand the occultic knowledge to help in some form of battle, be it personal, political, social, spiritual, whatever it is. But it did take you to the inner search, the shadow path, walk the dark path, follow your shadow, let it guide you to the light. So you kind of came in with the light, went into the dark, and then let your understanding of the dark bring you to the light again. So there's an interesting balance operating. There's an interesting balance operating here as well too, that the female deity actually represents Mars and the male deity represents Venus. So there may have been you might have almost had a bit of a role reversal kind of thing. You might have been very powerful politically. Like, say for argument's sake, there's a lot of our history, men, the patriarchy was more dominant than the matriarchy. But every once in a while there was someone like who was more powerful as a female leader and that kind of thing. Elizabeth I, Catherine de Medici, people like that. So I feel like there was almost a kind of a role reversal. It doesn't mean that you had to be a royal member of the royal family. I'm just saying there's something like that. There's something about what also helped you was the capacity to almost take on a role that was different or understand the other side very well. And this is part of the going into the darkness, to understand the darkness, to understand the left-hand path, that kind of thing. But I do think you have dabbled. So, and that has its own issues, like, and it's not necessarily everybody can choose their path. There's not really a problem with that. But I think you did come from wanting to be in the light, and I think you did return to the light. But I think that there are sort of things associated with that. There's a lot of power. Calypso is a bit like Baba Yaga, that kind of energy. It's very witchy, very sort of like alchemical, and it's particularly is described a bit like the Negreda. Like the thing about alchemy, for instance, if you think of it as a process, and that's a bit from the light to the dark to the light, because you start with all the ingredients in the laboratory. There's a point where you get to the Negreda where they're all burnt down. They're all burnt into the shadow embers, into the ash, and then out of that comes the light again. So for some of you, it just might be alchemy, but I do think for some of you, you did dabble, because Damnos is about, it's a Grim Reaper, it's a psychopomp, it's the karmic cycle, probably connected to the Ouroboros, and it is about understanding the outcomes of the choices that we make on an occult level. So I suspect in this life you got a lot of power and a lot of knowledge, but you might have been sort of paying off some of the karma of it. Now I think that you went in with good intentions, you came out with good intentions, and I'd say what you're doing with it now is good. But maybe part of why it's come up, and it'll be interesting to see as we go through with tarot, is that you may be in a situation where the understanding of the darker side of human nature, the darker side of the occult, is going to be necessary to do something for the light. And it's sort of almost like a trip down memory lane that is tricky. Now, I said in the last reading, and I'm going to say it here, you don't have to believe in past lives. You could just have come in, your soul could have come in with a lot of knowledge and a lot of power. And maybe as a child, you were tempted to use that in ways that now you would not do. So there's something here about, having a knowledge that is very powerful, but has to be dealt with judiciously. Okay, so let's have a look at what spiritual energies you've deeply worked with before. Let's look a little bit more into this. Then we're going to look at what role did you have in that life when you were doing it, and then we're going to have a look at why is this important now. Now, again, if you don't believe in past lives, think about what role you were in your life when you were kind of exploring this in this life. Okay, but I'm going to be largely talking about it like it's a past life, but I just sort of say that for anybody who doesn't believe in it. So let's see what a little bit more about these spiritual energies. The Tower, oh boy. Yeah, you were powerful, all right. The Emperor, very powerful, like in a very powerful sort of position in some way or other. The Queen of Coins, the Five of Coins, the Seven of Swords, wow. All right. So I think there's a reason I was talking about people like Elizabeth I, who had John Dee, or Catherine de Medici, who had Nostradamus. I feel like you were someone with great occult knowledge. You developed great occult knowledge, and you were close to power. Now, this doesn't have to be royal power. It could be power in a community, whatever. It doesn't have to be in medieval times. I'm just using those as examples. But you were very materially successful as a result of that. But it was a rags to riches story. Like you actually access this information to go from feeling like kind of pushed out and poor and not seen to being very powerful. So there's something like you really manifested a lot. And I think you may have also connected with a very powerful person in some form as well. So you're probably part of a power couple, but you were very, very occultic. Whether you were the female or the male in it, doesn't really matter. I feel female, but it doesn't have to be. But there is sort of something here about becoming a power couple through the occult arts. And it was a time potentially of great change, or you actually you brought down an old system, or, you had incredible power to bring about change so that you could rise up, like kind of almost burning everything down. And this is also a little bit of this energy. You burn everything down to achieve what you're trying to do. So So this is a very world-forming, power-forming energy that you had, and clever, like being able to play the politics, being able to kind of like gather what you want, even in a sense maybe somewhat illegitimately, because I've got to say, Pontu, I'm not saying that you are a dark soul, but I think you understand the dark arts, or you did. And there's always some moral ambiguity. I'd say this about any kind of magic, maybe except for maybe high angelic magic. There is some moral ambiguity in it. I'd say this quite often. And I think there was a moral ambiguity here, though. I think you came from a good place, and you may even have had a cause. Like with the Illuminated Warrior, there may have been a corrupt system, and you came to power with, maybe a partner through the occult to ultimately bring the light. But there was a cost, I think, maybe to you, and maybe you knew that you were doing that. You knew there was going to be a bit of a spiritual cost. Okay, so what role did you play specifically? I mean, we've got a bit of that already, I think, but what role did you play specifically? Nine of Coins, Two of Swords, Four of Cups, the Hermit reversed, the Knight of Swords reversed. Okay. So as I say, I do think you rose to power, or at least money. Maybe you were in the merchant class or something like that. It may not have been necessarily that you became politically or sort of like kind of royally powerful or anything like that. So there was definitely something about manifesting money and manifesting and going from rags to riches that was connected to all of this. I think you were a bit of a freedom fighter. Like, I think independence, economic independence for yourself and for others, those that you cared about, I think was part of this. It's like being in a corrupt system and getting the economic independence, which is very interesting with the world at the moment, I have to say, because this is meant to be a spiritual gift that your soul's calling upon now. So I think the motivation to break through to independence and freedom is part of it. And some of the occultic knowledge, why you studied and learnt, was to have a bit of a competitive advantage in being able to answer questions or solve problems, because it looks like you made some of your power, your wealth, out of breaking things through blocks that they had, and sort of like, again, the ultimate block of maybe a corrupt system. You were known. You didn't necessarily tell people about your occult ability, but your knowledge and you were seen. This was not a private thing. I would presume the occult learnings, which are probably done in some form of order or whatever, they're very secret. But you weren't. You did have a public profile, and interestingly enough, publicly you appeared to be only supporting the concept of gradual and reasoned change, but I feel you were really behind the scenes with the occult stuff, pushing for more. So it's almost like whatever this was, you understood the blocks and you kind of created your own wealth and your own sort of stability out of it. But what you were publicly showing was someone who was a reasonable sort of person moving towards sustainable change. But underneath, you were kind of dealing with the powers of the cosmos. It's very interesting energy. So why is this important now? Why is your soul calling upon this now? Because it is calling upon something that for the soul's equilibrium is a bit challenging, as I say, the moral ambiguity of magical power, like true magical power, can't be underestimated, particularly if it does veer into the shadow path or the left-hand path. It's like, it's not, again, I'm not criticizing people who do it. I'm just saying they're brave, and it has certain requirements of its own, I guess. Temperance reversed. The Devil. Oh, wow. Okay. Page of Coins reversed. Five of Cups. Okay. There's something out of balance again that's got to do with power, like that you're around. This could be political, social, in your family, whatever it is. This is being called upon because an understanding of where the shadow aspects of one's psychology, other people's psychology, power, family dynamics, whatever it is entrapping. So it's to bring something back into balance. You have to understand it. You have to be able to see it to bring it back into balance. Because at the moment it's like you're faced with a situation that people don't even know how to plan or what to do because they don't understand the situation, and that they're kind of caught in a grief cycle, or they're caught in a sense of disappointment or pessimism. So people feel trapped. There's something that you're around, or it's going to come in soon, where people feel trapped. And your understanding of that darker side of human nature, that darker side of power, is what is necessary, because you have to be able to see it. You know, like a lot of people will just not see things, and people wonder, like, how do we end up in, fascistic regimes or whatever? It's because we refuse. We stick our heads in the sand and we don't see the stuff. You will see it. You will see it, and you'll see it clearly. It's not just propaganda. It's not the demonization of one side or the other that we're getting a lot of in politics. You will see that. I'm not saying we're heading into fascism or that's what you're involved in. I'm just saying it as an example. People kind of incrementally, shifting, as they say, the Overton window. Things that would have seemed terrible 10 years ago seem normal now. It's like that's what happens. But if you understand the shadow and you can actually see it, you're the one who's equipped to call it out and do something about it. So I think that's why it's calling upon that knowledge, that experience. It's going to be important. Okay, so let's have a look at 3 other past life or types of past lives that you've had that impact this. And if you don't believe in past lives, it's 3 other sort of energies within your current life that impact this. So first one, the Cartographer's Atlas, a life dedicated to mapping the physical or metaphorical landscapes, discovering new connections, or as an architect of worlds. Yeah, it's just like creating something new, being able to manifest. Like you may literally have had lives where instead of it doing it on an occult level, you did it by expanding out to unknown areas, getting the guidance within it, coming back and being clear on what the world was. Secondly, we have the Stone Circle, connection to ancient rites, stewardship of forgotten wisdom, or as a guardian of sacred spaces. Yeah, this isn't the only life that you're involved in all of that. And thirdly, the stonemason's edifice, skill in crafting enduring structures, shaping the stone of society's foundations, or being part of monumental constructions. Okay, so you might have had a very physical way of doing it sometimes. Sometimes it's about making money. Sometimes it's about physicality. Sometimes it's about being in an occult order. Sometimes it's about extending the horizons and the understanding. What I would also say, whenever I see something like the stonemason's edifice or something other ones like that, I think of Freemasons. I think of all the occultic information that is built into some of the major cities of the world in their architecture and their town planning. So I suspect you were somehow connected with that. Okay, let's have a look at the alchemy, the kind of magical alchemy. And there is a big alchemy thing here because it is talking about a bit like the Negredo. And for some of you, it may have played out as being an alchemist. But let's just see the alchemy energy in the life that we're talking about, where your soul really got this deep experience, and then also how it's playing out in this life. So when it first came into being, mortification, yeah. I think there was almost a level on which your soul knew that playing with the sort of shadow forces was going to actually take its toll on you. It was kind of, being happy to go into the depths for something that you thought was for the light. But it was a heavy life on that level. It was a heavy, heavy amount of change. And it's very much that sort of sense of the Negredo and that kind of thing. So, yeah, this was not for sissies, I've got to say. It's a life that you did. And now, the uncreated, okay, because you are very good at creating things, but it's not in this situation, just as it was then. It wasn't enough just to have the tower energy. It was then you had to bring something new in. So you're drawing on occultic principles and occultic understanding, and in its own way, understanding the shadow path and how it balances off. You need both for creation. You need chaos for order, all of those sort of things. Being prepared, strong enough to do that, is also part of being able to bring something new in. So that's why it's happening this time, Randy. As I say, you understand the problem, so you can you can create a solution. A lot of people around you can't. Okay, so let's have a look at some spiritual gifts that are arising out of this or have arisen that are important to help with that energy. Moon magic. Well, that kind of makes sense with all the sort of witchy sort of energy. You pay attention to the cycles of the moon. You probably know a lot about that, maybe a lot about astrology as well. And ascension. Yeah, this is the point. This is about helping other people. We have to know what is the thing that holds us down to be able to know how to rise above it. So I think that's the overall purpose. But, as I say, it's almost a high-risk strategy. You've got to be very strong to do this. And you've got to be very strong in yourself not to just become the darkness when you go into the darkness. But I don't think you did. Okay, so let's then have a look at some stars to guide you. So like a couple of planetary pairings that you can work with. Chiron and Pluto. Yeah, there's meant to be a healing energy, but it's the healing that goes down into the depths. You're very Persephone going into Hades. You're very, as I say, that's the whole point. The true healing can only come through being able to be in the depths as well. And moon again, moon magic, and Venus, like connecting to sort of something that is about the heart. And keeping, I think, the emotions and the heart pure in many ways, like going into there, but keeping things pure as well. And that's really important when you're dealing with this sort of energy. Okay. Last but not least, I'm going to do something that I've done in a few picker cards I've been filming lately, and I don't really know what order they're going to be published. So this might be the first time you see it, or you might have seen it already. But basically, I usually end with a card from an oracle deck or whatever. But what I'm doing this time round is that I'm asking you to think of a number between 1 and 5. And I'm shuffling a tarot deck, another tarot deck now. And I'm just going to put out 5 cards, each corresponding to one of those numbers. And that will be how I sum up and synthesize this for you, depending upon what you choose. It just gives a little bit more nuance, I guess, for a collective reading. So if you pause the video, if you haven't already thought of a number from 1 to 5, when you're ready, pile number one, not pile number 1, is 2 of Swords reversed. Number 2 is Devotion. That's an additional major Arcana card in this. Pile number 3 is the Emperor reversed. Pile number 4 is the 10 of Wands reversed. And pile number 5 is the Hanged One. Now, it's interesting, like all of those except one are reversed. And it tells me a lot of this is about the depths. A lot of this is secret. A lot of this is internal. If you chose number 1, one of the things you really have to be careful of in this life is that you don't feel that you have no choice. So if you sort of feel, yes, I resonate to this, I think I did go into the dark side and I feel I'm drawn into that and I don't think I can escape, that's not true. Because you did the going in and the coming out. That's what you did in this life. But there was a lot of power around and there's a lot of stuff that you carry with it. So it's very important to use that occult understanding to help you get clarity to make a decision and to know that you can make a decision. There might be some karma that you're working out, though I think your intentions were pure enough. But there might be, but that doesn't mean you're without choice. If you chose number 2, think very carefully about what you spiritually adhere to at the moment. There could be something, you could be thinking, your guide is helping you, but it could be a kind of a less, like maybe mischievous through to malefic guide from the past. So don't get too devoted until you see good coming from any spiritual connection you have or any spiritual group that you join. There's something here about being very clear and being very independent. And it was part of this. And so it's like, it's not really a good idea to go and join a spiritual group so much as it is to find your own connection to the divine. If you chose number 3, you're still dealing with some power issues here. I think you need to have a look at whether they are externalized, like whether you are dealing with oppressive power and how to deal with it. And that might be connected to this. It might be calling on this knowledge and this understanding if you're in a position where you're around bullies, bad bosses, difficult partners or whatever, or whether this is a shadow side of you that you need to be aware of as you move into using this skill. because we all have to do that. I mean, like the issue is not so much connecting into shadow forces. It's our motivations and what we then do to others. So it sort of depends how that plays out. If you chose number 4, then there is something about understanding this is meant to help you relieve a burden where you may even have felt guilty and felt that you were not spiritual, you were selfish, or you were too material or something. This is meant to give you an understanding of the true knowledge that you got and why you got it and why it was important and why it could be important now. So there is maybe something about this reading that was meant to relieve a kind of spiritual burden for you. And if you chose number 5, I think you did this knowing full well that there was a kind of sacrificial association with it, that you did almost allow yourself to be in that energy, to bring the light to that energy and to bring the light to a situation. So it may be saying that you're called upon to do that again now, or it may be saying let go of the sacrifice side of this. You learnt what you needed to learn in this space. You also did it from a higher purpose, and you can do it from a higher purpose now. That it's less about the mortification this time, it's more about the creation. So if you feel like, oh yeah, I think I dabbled in the dark arts and I'm not happy that I did that, don't, flagellate yourself over it. It's not necessary, because there was something here where that the motives were good. And even if some of the choices, when you look back at it, you wouldn't do again, that's what being alive is about. So I hope that resonates for you, Pile 2. I hope you enjoyed the reading. If so, please like the video and subscribe. If you care to share in the comments, I'd love to hear. Otherwise, I hope to see you in future readings. Welcome, Pile 3, to your reading. So you came to the reading with the Death card from the Antiquarian Tarot. And choosing the Antiquarian Tarot, as I said, doesn't mean that this is necessarily a life that was sort of like in Victorian or Edwardian England or Europe or something like that. But this deck sort of has that sort of feeling to it for me. So I do feel when I see the Death card there that we could be talking about the sort of, whether you in that particular culture or not, or time or not, whether that was where you got it, that there is something about the sort of spiritual things that were looked at a lot at that time, and particularly around, I guess, the crossing over point, reincarnation, life, death, all of that kind of thing. With that card, that seems pretty obvious. So it probably sort of like goes from one point to another, goes almost from something like spiritualism, mediumship or whatever, all the way over to necromancy, depending upon what we're looking at. Now, I actually do think for the most part, we're talking more about spiritualism, mediumship, and helping those with an open heart to deal with the life and death cycle and all that kind of thing. That's what I really feel is going on, because we have the openness at Driftwood Heart, open up your heart in order to receive, allow the love to flow. And then we also have rebirth, the holy font, drink deep from the cup of the sacred spring, receive and be reborn. So I do think there's something here about skills around connecting with the beyond the veil, operating as a kind of human psychopomp, being a medium, those sort of things. In whatever life or cultural time, it's got to do with that. It's very shamanic as well, So as I say, it doesn't have to be Edwardian sort of England or whatever. But the interesting thing is, why I kind of said it could sort of like go from mediumship all the way to something like necromancy is the cards that we have here, because this is about dealing with power that includes understanding your shadow and remaining pure. Because the Lucifer card in this deck, is Lucifer's the light bringer, but it does talk about the fact that Lucifer reigns over the demons, and if you banish your demons or deny them, that they can come back and haunt you with Lucifer's okay. That's kind of what this card talks about. So there's a sort of a sense of understanding your own shadow and your own motives. And then with Diana, goddess of the moon, she is about caring, open heart and purity. So I think, it may depend upon who's come to this reading, or it may be that one of the challenges that you had to do because of this ability was remain with the open heart and with the clarity of the karmic consequences of doing anything else, which meant you needed to know yourself very well. Because certainly, if you were talking about like Edwardian or Victorian England, I am sure there were legitimate mediums. There were also shysters. You would have been a legitimate one, but it's just how you use that energy. And if you get too interested in the power of that and too much in love with the power of that, you could end up, being a John Dee, in Elizabethan England, using necromancy. I don't think most of you are. I don't think that was what most of you were doing. This feels very much like mediumship and the kind of moral responsibility that came with that, and an understanding of the karmic outcomes of it. So, but as I say, this could have happened in some sort of very ancient tribe or something with shamanism, a very similar sort of energy, and when you sort of like go down and understand yourself, you have to understand the shadow within to get to the purity as well. So it could play out either way. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at three things with the tarot. We're firstly going to have a look at what spiritual energies and experiences have you deeply worked with before. And if you don't believe in reincarnation, this could be just earlier in your life. So just apply anything I say, because I'm going to really talk about this like a past life. So just apply it to earlier stages in your life if you don't believe in past lives. We're then going to look at what role or path did you align to as a result of that in that life. And then we're going to have a look at why it matters now. So firstly, a little bit more about the sort of set of abilities, knowledge, experience that you had and developed in this life. King of Swords, Ten of Wands reversed, the World reversed, Justice, the Star. Wow, okay. So I feel like, in whatever it was, whatever time period or whatever culture, you were very learned in what you did, and I think you dealt with other educated people. This feels like educated society. And it feels as though you actually helped people understand the passage between the worlds so that there was a burden, a fear that was taken out of it. The interesting thing is I'm just suddenly getting for some of you, although you would have done it on a very spiritual level, you might have done it very medically as well. Like I'm just kind of getting this vision here of sort of like, you'd see in some of those old sort of films and TV series, the early sort of doctors teaching surgery, very early surgical techniques or teaching students anatomy, and they're kind of in the center of a room, and then there's all these sort of like people sitting around, the doctors to be watching and learning that. I don't know, I'm getting that for some of you might have actually manifested it that way, but there was a spiritual side of it to you. You were very fascinated by the nature of life and death and the nature of the soul and the spirit. So some of you, instead of like being mediums per se, might have been either medical, or you might have been trying to sort of like understand what happens, is there life after death, that kind of thing. But there's certainly something here about that the end is not the end, and relieving fear. It's interesting, like Justice there makes me feel like, that might be the karmic thing. Some of what you might have been learning and teaching others. And I think you did teach, or as I say, if you were a medium or whatever, there was an undercurrent of teaching, like a knowledge that you brought to it. Might have been just to get people to understand karmic justice and following the North Star. So that was possibly part of it. I think you were well known though. I think you were a bit of a star. I think that you were ahead of your time in whatever this was. Or you're an astrologer, I'm getting. For some of you, it might have been astrology. Again, depending upon when and where it was. So let's have a look. I just sort of feel like there's a kind of educational, comforting, what is life and death all about, and potentially mediumistically connecting with those who went beyond the veil. But I thought you're very well educated in whatever that meant in the time and place, and known for doing this. I'm also thinking like for some of you, I actually think for some of you, and this is probably pointing more to what's happening in this life, but you might have done it a bit in the other life. The kind of psychic forensic detective, like what really happened when people passed away. There might have been something like that as well. Okay, so let's get a little bit more about that. What role or path did you follow using these gifts? Understanding that you had this sort of like knowledge and ability to connect to the other side, or to get a sense about, the karmic cycles, that kind of thing. Two of Wands reversed, the Lovers, Four of Pentacles. Oh, that's the blank card, but it's also the psychic, spiritual, medium card. So again, I think it's saying medium. Three of Pentacles. I think you did this. So it's saying primarily you did it as some sort of psychic So even if there was a medical side of it or whatever, you did it more as a psychic, or most of you did it more as a psychic than anything. You certainly use kind of divinatory arts. Whether you told everybody about that's another matter. You were very much about, like, there was one side of what you did was almost helping people around relationships and choices in relationships, or dealing, I guess, with maybe loss or grief or whatever it was. But like, I think also choices in relationships. And the other side of it was about connecting the right people. I mean, it's interesting because like most of the time when we think of mediumship, it's sort of like connecting somebody with someone who's passed on. But this feels more like it feels, maybe it feels a little bit more shamanic actually. It feels a little bit more like ancestral healing. It feels a bit more like understanding the kind of material outcome of things and bringing the right people together. So whether it was as an adjunct to what you did as a medium or something like that, or as a teacher or something like that, but you brought the right people together and you allowed the building of something that was collaborative and well-founded, understanding these sort of spiritual justice principles in some way. Very interesting. So why does it matter now? Nine of Cups. Eight of Swords reversed. Eight of Pentacles. Why it matters now, and this is interesting, it's completely different to all the other three. It doesn't mean that you couldn't have gone to more than one, but about this set of skills. Why it matters this time isn't so much that you're meant to do anything with it. You're meant to be rewarded for what you did. You did something really good. Like you understood the spiritual pattern. So what you did was very good and you helped a lot of people. And as a result of that, you're meant to get a wish. And you're meant to free yourself from a feeling that you have to keep studying or learning because you're just a natural at this. Like stop worrying about whether you're good enough or whether you've got the skills or whatever. In some aspect of your life, and it doesn't even have to be the spiritual, though it could be, but it doesn't even have to be that. You don't have to put so much drama in things. You're going to get a wish. So this is telling you that because you had the open heart, because you did balance this very well, because you did understand spiritual things. It's good karma. This is really talking about good karma, and that really well deserved. So some wish that you have, pile 3, is going to come true. You can cease worrying about it. You can cease kind of trying to perfect it and make it, and getting all worried about it. Like, stop worrying about it. It's going to happen. Like, that's what it's saying. There is a reward. So that's really lovely. Okay, let's have a look at some other past lives that might have also contributed to this reward that's coming through. The Liberator's Chain, lifetimes dedicated to freeing oneself and others from physical, mental or spiritual shackles. Yeah, like freeing people, like justice, bringing things into justice, helping people, stopping grief, doing whatever it is. You really have helped a lot of people. Okay, second life. The Lighthouse Beacon, serving as a guide for the lost, a beacon of hope or a solitary watcher over turbulent seas, and also potentially, beyond the veil. And the Charioteer's Reins, life spent in pursuit, steering through challenges, or a driver of change and progress. So where it was necessary, you were able to sort of like help people go towards good growth, expansion or whatever, help people when they were lost and liberate people when it was necessary. You've got a lot of good karma. You're very nice people, Pastor. It's very lovely energy. So let's have a look for you, like what was the alchemical energy? What alchemical energy was going on for you in the life where you did all this, all the main life that we're talking about, and then how is that playing out now for you? So in that life, autumn. Yeah, this is letting go for the past, being able to let go of the past to allow the new growth to come through. And that does, again, it fits with being a medium or something like that. It's understanding the processes of things and what is appropriate and when things need to be let go of. And what about now? If you're getting a reward, Pole 3. What's the alchemy around that? Saturn. You've waited. You've done your time. You've done the karmic cycle. You've understood it. You've lived by the rules. It may be that it takes a bit of time. Saturn is not fast to get your reward, but you're going to get your reward. And again, the Saturn kind of connects to the Grim Reaper. Like, you are very connected to the other side. You're very much a natural medium. But you've done a lot. This is saying that you're kind of ancient in the good that you've done. So you are going to reap what you sow, and it's going to be good. But something actually I think has to shift to allow that to bring in, because there's a shifting energy there, and like allowing that to pass through to get what you want. But that's the energy around it, and it will be lasting. It's well deserved and lasting and material in some way. Okay. So what's other spiritual gifts are arising to go along with this for you? Sacred heart, the driftwood heart. Yeah, you're a very good person. Like, this is lovely. Like I just think the energy here, I mean, I really like to see that somebody who comes with an open heart and a good understanding of the spiritual balances of things, that they get a reward. Yeah, but for you, it's like it's the purity and the, like going back to the Dhyana, the purity around this, the reward is there. Like, it's within your heart already. It's just got to be manifest, so to speak, in time, space and time. And move. So, like, I'd say that's just be confident. I get a sort of sense with that when we use our bodies and we kind of move and we get into motion, we get confident. So I think once you understand the purity of this and the purity and why it would work, why you deserve the reward, you start moving, you start being confident. Like, being confident that you're on the right path is a really important thing here. Okay. Let's also have a look at a couple of planetary pairings that might help guide this energy for you. Jupiter and Pluto, yeah, big expansion, big change, like something big, like dream big actually. If you're going to dream big. Dream something that will really shift and change and transform your life. And it is a very transformative thing as well too. But there's a very benefic energy around change for you. And Mercury and Pluto, yeah, articulate it, speak it in some way. Write it down, speak it, do a poem, do something. Like, speak the change into being, because it's meant to be, and speak confidently. You're also someone who can talk people through change in a very good way and in a very kind way. This is part of it as well. And you are comfortable in, the afterlife and the underworld and Hades, whatever it is, in a way to connect the purity of things. So, as the Lucifer card did say, if you banish all your shadow down to the depths, then they'll come back to haunt you. You don't do that. You understand the balance of stuff. You're actually just coming from a very pure place. So therefore you can kind of learn your demons and deal with them, as opposed to ending up in a battle with them. Okay. So last but not least, what I have been doing in a few picker cards I've been filming over the last few days, and I'm not going to always do this, but I'm just doing it a bit at the moment as an experiment. And I don't know whether I might actually publish this one before I publish the other two, so I'm just explaining it. Is instead of just getting an oracle deck and pulling a single card to bring it together, I'm actually using a different tarot deck, and I'm going to ask you to choose a number between 1 and 5, and do that while I'm shuffling, or pause if you need a bit more time. Because when I sort of lay it down, I'll lay down 5 cards and they'll correspond to those numbers. And depending upon which number you do, whatever I say around that corresponding card is the thing that synergizes this energy. It's just a way of making it a little bit more varied in a collective reading. So for number 1, we have Judgment. Oh, that makes a lot of sense. For number 2, we have the Moon. For number 3, we have the Ace of Wands. For number 4, we have the Seven of Wands reversed. And for number 5, we have the Queen of Pentacles reversed. Okay. So if you chose number 1, you probably know and sense this. You have a very strong understanding of karma, very strong understanding of the kind of spiritual rules and laws that we live by. And so I think that something is coming quite soon for you, which will be the gift. It's like a calling to do something. You need to move quickly with it when it comes, but move with confidence. That's why I was saying move. Move with confidence when the opportunity comes. If you chose number 2, then there is something still a bit hidden around what this gift could be. You may not even be aware of what it is. Think about the gift that you would ask for if you were in nighttime in the shadow compared to in the light of day. What is it's a connection in some way and it goes to your depths, it goes to your emotional depths in particular, that will help give you, shine a light on what it is that you want. And you can almost literally call it forward like this wolf is doing there. If you chose number 3, the gift is very creative. It could be a new creative idea or inspiration or channeling. It could be a new love or a new passion. It could be just the return of action after a period of time. I mean, you know, it felt almost the health stuff. For some of you, you might have been dealing with, you know, a bit of a debilitating health issue, and it's you're going to heal, and a new rush of energy is coming through. But whatever it is, there's a lot of energy, a lot of promise, and it's got that creative, passionate, active spark to it. If you chose number 4, you don't think you're up to this yet, but you are. So part of the gift, or part of it, whatever you want, you feel you can't compete for, but this is telling you that you can. That there's like grace is coming, Paul. And grace is something that you think you almost don't deserve, but probably on some level you do. But it's something that like lifts you above. So don't put yourself down and don't doubt. And if you chose number 5, you may wonder whether you can stay committed to something that you really want. You may, partly because this spiritual gift makes you understand the temporality of all life, you may think, well, you know, like, does everything passes away, so does it matter? But I think this is saying, yeah, this does matter, because you're actually, just stick at something that you really want, because you're meant to be given it as a reward, and it will happen in this life. You know, you don't have to wait for the next life. So I hope that resonates for you, Pile 3. I hope you enjoyed the reading. This is actually a really lovely one. It's a lovely one to finish on. I'm really happy for you that you're going to get your gift, but I think that you deserve it. So we need people like you, and I'm very happy that you exist. So if you enjoyed the reading, please like the video and subscribe. If you care to share in the comments, I'd love to hear. Otherwise, I hope to see you in future readings.